We're going to start the program in the sake of time. So I'd like to introduce some people so you know some of the people you're sitting around and who all is attending our annual meeting this year. First, I'd like to introduce our board of directors. So would all the board members please stand? Thank you. So this year we invited or asked the board if they would like to bring their spouses or a significant other. So would all the spouses of board members please stand, or significant other? Glad to have you and I appreciate you coming. I think it's important to know what your mate is doing for the sake of our community. Should be proud of them because they're doing a good job, and we're glad to have them as part of an essential part of Goodwill, particularly because they're my boss. I'd like to introduce to you all of our store managers because they come from all over our territory. Would all the store managers please stand? Very good. Is anybody left? That's a large group. And special guests, so thank all of you for coming and joining us today. If you've looked at our annual report, which is on your table, it's about embracing change. And that's the theme of our luncheon today. When you get time to read the letter that Dave and I wrote as an introduction into the annual report, we talk about the value of change that's essential to the well-being of our Goodwill, how important change is to what we do. I think that all of our staff members and managers would agree with me that change is constant in our Goodwill, and we've gotten used to it. To describe that change that occurred last year, I have to think in terms of what each department does. So we have a number of departments that support our overall activities, and I would like to introduce, as a way of talking about change, the vice presidents in charge of each of those departments. I'll try not to embarrass you, but when I call your name, if you would stand, and then if we would hold our applause to the end, that'll save your hands and a little bit of time. So first, Tamara Williams, who is Vice President of HR. Tamara? Tamara has many roles, including the HR services that she provides to our some 800 employees. She manages our insurance programs, recruiting, and in her spare time, she runs the janitorial service for the Panama City International Airport. This year, we asked her if she could improve the time it took to get an employee on the job. We were losing too many employees in the process in a tight labor market. This was not an easy task, but it was accomplished. Today, an applicant can be on the job in one day from time they fill out an application. This is a great advantage to our Goodwill in this labor market that we face today. Thank you, Tamara. Lisa Land. Hey, Lisa. Lisa's Vice President of Support Services. Lisa does so much for our organization. Contracts, maintenance, security, special events, and the car washes. Lisa is constantly moving from one project to the next. taking care of events such as hurricanes, a national conference, company picnics, and this annual meeting. This year, she's hired a maintenance company to help her keep up to date with all of our 50-something locations, while she built out the outlet center space and trimmed our mowing contracts to make them more efficient and profitable. She's also responsible for renovating the Market Street Car Wash and last year the Capital City Car Wash. Thank you, Lisa. Fred Watford. Hey, Fred. Fred's Vice President of Transportation. Fred provides a very efficient organization, a reorganization of our transportation department. And then Hurricane Michael came and wiped out half of his facilities. Out of necessity, Fred began transporting all of our salvage and excess donations from our western stores to Tallahassee. He organized weekend sales in the warehouse to accomplish the overflow of material, filled up a new warehouse with donations, and set up additional salvage operations. We also now have, for the first time, same-day home pickup here and in Panama City. The stores are enjoying everyday service by a resilient transportation department that can only get better when our new warehouse and outlet store are finished in the next couple of months. With all the problems posed by the storm, Fred has kept Goodwill moving. Thank you. Stacy Larkin. Hey, Stacy. Vice President of Mission Services. At the beginning of last year, the main office for mission services in the western portion of our territory was under construction, and many of the personnel were dealing with problems at home. Even so, we managed to provide services to over 9,000 individuals last year. We also continued to produce online courses for easy access by the public and other Goodwills. We've purchased a new software system that will allow better interaction between clients and our service workers. Good job, Stacy. Alan Monofsky, Vice President of Retail. We lost 3 stores in the hurricane. So little changes in retail have really made a difference, not only in maintaining but increasing our retail revenue. For example, employee recognition programs have reduced turnover in our stores by 10%. Improvement in sight, sound, and smell has enhanced the buyer's experience, and Best Brands has increased the average ticket. Changes in processing clothes and wares has improved the efficiency of our operation, getting the product to the floor quicker and increasing sales. Good job, Alan. Shannon Harper. Hey, Shannon. Vice President of Accounting. Shannon's always making changes to keep us up to date in technology. We have moved from Windows 7 to Windows 10, upgraded all the laptops in the Prosperity Center, installed NitoScan for book listings in our stores and ADCs, converted our phone system to voice over internet with Ring Central, installed smart safes in many of our stores, and that's an ongoing process. And in addition to all these changes, which she stays on top of, we moved payroll from an outside contractor to in-house processing, and it's running smoothly. Good job. Kim Gay. Kim? Kim's Vice President of Communication. Kim's addition to our executive staff is change in and of itself. She's brand new to our organization, but she's already hit the ground running, helping with CARF and now the annual meeting. So please welcome the newest member of our staff and appreciation for all of our vice presidents. Now, in addition to taking care of all of their departments, the executive staff in the past couple of weeks has been preparing for our accreditation. All of Goodwills are required to be accredited, and most go through an accreditation process with an organization we call BARF. No, CARF. Stacy called it BARF. CARF stands for the Commission of Accreditation for Rehab Facilities. So they came, had two inspectors, and they spent a couple of days with us and looked at over 1,000 points of policy procedures, our facilities, and everything about what we do and how we do it. So we would have made 100 if it weren't for me. I got gigged on part of it, but I told the inspector that, you know, I was a lot more domesticated now than I used to be. She didn't buy that. We got one gig out of over 1,000, so that's not bad. So we have a very special guest today that flew in last night from Washington to join us. He's been with our organization for a little over a year. He is our new president of Goodwill International and CEO, Steve Preston. So Steve, would you join me?
I had a friend once who was doing a big speech to about 400 people and decided to go to the bathroom after he'd been hooked up with the lav mic, and came into the room before his speech and got a standing ovation before he started speaking. So I'm very cautious now.
All right. So the first thing I'd like to ask you, Steve, is how do you eat fried chicken at a banquet? Cautiously.
Cautiously, yeah. I have been domesticated in that way, so I figured it out.
Okay. So that kind of brings me to a point. I was on the board of directors of Goodwill International and served on the selection committee and got to meet Steve early on, which was a year and a half ago or something like that. So I got to know him a little bit and got to hear about his background. But for the audience, Steve, would you tell them a little bit about where you came from and your past experiences?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of them, so we might be here for a while. But I, started my career in banking in New York. I was very fortunate to have had an opportunity to go to to get a great education, and that worked out well. So I started working in Wall Street at a large investment bank. I used to tell people it was Lehman Brothers until all that happened, so now I just say a large investment bank. But I was there many years before it folded, and it was a terrific training ground. And then I decided that my clients were having more fun than I was, so I decided I wanted to be part of building companies, and became a CFO of a large company and moved into corporate leadership. And after 25 years of that path, I got a call.
What companies were those, Steve?
So I started a company called First Data, was a client of ours. It was a small company then it became a much larger company. They do the processing for credit cards and debit cards for major banks. So kind of in the the e-payments business, if you think of it that way. A large company called ServiceMaster, which had about 75,000 employees and about 250,000 under management, that did large contracts. And so I got a call from a friend who was working in government in Washington and said, gosh, we're looking for people who know how to run big, complicated businesses, and a lot of government agencies are big, complicated businesses. Would you ever think about serving in Washington? And I'd never really been a terribly political person, but I was sort of at a point in life where I was trying to think what maybe make a different kind of contribution. So one thing led to another, and I had a chance to run the Small Business Administration. And the Small Business Administration, which many people don't realize, in addition to doing a lot of things for small businesses, actually makes loans to homeowners who've lost their home in a natural disaster or had it damaged. And it was about 10 months after Katrina, and almost nobody had gotten their loan yet. So there were 160,000 people in the Gulf who were trying to rebuild their homes, trying to get their lives back. And they said, gosh, would you be interested in this job? And I thought, well, this, how bad can this be? And I sort of Googled SBA, and I realized, it was quite a firestorm, public firestorm. And I just said, and they'd also offered me a different role, which was a very good role, but not very public. And I thought, if you're going to have an opportunity like this, if you think about 20, 30 years from now, would I rather look back and say, I put myself in the middle of the battle and maybe I didn't win, but I tried, versus doing something else. I decided, no, that's what I want to do. So, I sort of parachuted into the Washington fray. I went from private citizen to very public citizen very quickly. And it was just a huge blessing. Fortunately, we were able to fix the issues relatively quickly, provide funding for a lot of people who desperately needed to rebuild their homes. And then another large national disaster hit, which was the housing crisis. And I was asked then to go run the housing agency as the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. So I was on the board of the TARP, if any of you know what that is. That was also known as the federal bailout, the bank bailout. I was on the board of that in the middle of sort of all that was happening during the financial crisis. And so it was, in many ways, it was just a huge blessing to be able to serve, and that is as challenging and crazy and public as it all was. And so I went from that, I went back to the private sector. I ran a couple of companies after that. But one of the things I learned, I guess I had a lot more exposure to when I was in the federal government, is helping families in need. And I had spent a lot of my life, especially my younger life, working with kids who came from difficult backgrounds, and just loved that. But seeing what happens later in life when people either don't have access, maybe make poor choices, get on the wrong path, and are sort of on the outside looking in and wondering, how can I get my life back? How can I have a different type of future than I have now? Or how can I get out of this hole that I'm in? And so I really developed a deep concern and deep passion for adults. And so increasingly, when I was in the private sector, I was spending more and more of my time working with not-for-profits in Chicago that were specifically focused on workforce development, helping people start small businesses not so they could turn them into big businesses, but so they could pay their bills, right? And so I left the private sector and decided I wanted to do something like this full time. And I wrote, actually, I left my phone on the table. I had a picture of it, but I wrote a personal mission statement about a year and a half before I got the Goodwill job that said my personal mission is to run a company that helps difficult to employ people something like acquire the skills and find dignity through work, thereby transforming their lives, their families, and their communities. And so this was before I even knew what Goodwill was. And a year later, I got the call from Goodwill, and I said, I don't want to do that. Why would I do that? It's retail. I didn't even know what Goodwill did. And the recruiter called me back a little later and said, this is exactly what you want to do. And so I just couldn't believe it when I dug deeper into the mission, I looked at this mission statement I'd written for myself a year and a half before, and it almost looked like exactly the job that I have today. And I don't know that there are any other jobs that look like this job, So I just felt like it was providential, and the other thing I love about it is, having been a business person for most of my life, having run companies, there's a huge business component to it, which I love just in terms of doing, right? And there's the primary mission piece, which I think is completely aligned with really the issue in life I care the most about, which is helping people find their way to to dignity, to self-sustainability. There's so much, and I didn't bring your annual report up there, but if you look at the values statement, you begin to list in your values statement really the inherent value of work in terms of dignity, and giving people a platform for creativity and self-expression and community, and obviously livelihood. And so what you all do at Goodwill, and what all you all do on the board here, is such an essential, life-changing mission for the people that you serve.
Thank you. So you've been on the job a little over a year.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're getting your legs under you? And what's your first year been like?
Well, you know when you go to a rodeo and the gate opens up and the bull starts bucking, you know, it's still going. It's been a busy year, but I'm still in the saddle. It's been fantastic. One of the greatest things is going to our local affiliates and seeing what happens on the ground. You know, I don't ever serve a participant. You know, I don't ever work in a store. I'm kind of, you know, back in Washington providing services to members. So when I actually get to go out and, you know, had a chance to poke in on a couple of classes today, meet some of the team, it's just so special, because that's where it all happens. That's where we get to see the faces of the people whose lives are in the process of being changed. And, you know, I always say they're investing in themselves. They're the ones who are taking the action, but we're just, you know, we're a chapter in a long story, and hopefully it's a very good chapter. So it's been a great year because I've been able to get out and see, you know, a lot of the local Goodwills around the country, the passion of the people who are serving every day. As much as I like to talk, I'm also a pretty good listener, and I've learned, you know, many times that going into a new situation with a level of humility and listening and asking a lot of questions is a much better way to move forward. And people have been very gracious with me in terms of giving me insights, coaching, guidance, and so it's been remarkable. It's been also remarkable to see not only the value of what we do, but the commitment of the people that are doing it. And, you know, I'm so thrilled that, you know, so many people from the team are here today. Because, you know, when you anchor into that mission every day, and it's one of the things I loved about being in the government, you know, when you're in the battle every day and you've got a job and it's going crazy and you're worn down, if you know what's at the end of that and it matters to you, that's fuel to take every day. So for me, I'm fine if the bull keeps bucking, because it's such a great part, it's such a privilege to be part of it.
So a lot of our guests here know a little bit about our Goodwill, and maybe that's all of the Goodwill experience they've had. Tell our audience what the movement looks like. What does Goodwill look like across the United States and Canada?
Yeah. So, you know, we're a massive organization. We have 3,300 stores, which really makes us one of the largest numbers of locations of any retailer, you know. So we're very significant just from a pure retail footprint. We're divided into 157 territories, and each one of those territories is an independent nonprofit. And so that's why each one of those Goodwills has its own board of directors, it owns its own assets, and they're all affiliated with Goodwill Industries International, which is what I lead. We look across that network, it is a network that has $6 billion in revenue. About $4.5 billion of that comes from the retail stores. About $750 million comes from what we call contract services. So, you know, I know you do some lawn service and some other things here locally. We might do food service, but and often those are to help employ people that have different challenges in life. And then we get about $700 or $800 million, about $700 million through different philanthropic sources and government grants to provide services. So it's a $6 billion network. And we provide our services to people in three ways. We've got about 130,000 employees across that network, and a significant percentage of our employees throughout the network are very similar to the participants that we serve in our programs, and many people view those stores as being a vehicle to provide that support. Then we provide face-to-face services in programs to nearly 2 million people each year. So it's a very significant number of people that are coming into our classrooms, coming into our workforce development programs. And luckily I got to see some of yours today, which was really great. And then we provide services to well over 30 million people online each year. And that is, those are online development programs in digital skills and all sorts of things. And we have everything from Goodwills who've got 3 million in revenue to 300 million in revenue. So Goodwills come in all shapes and sizes. And but they all share a common commitment to the mission, even though when they show up locally, sometimes they adapt it based on local needs. So you all have, you know, housing support for people in need. You all have preschool programs, which we also got to see today. Kids are always a crowd pleaser. I love that, you know. So, but that core of workforce development really is a connector across almost the entire network.
So you have a staff and an office in Washington, and let's just say that that Goodwill is a stovetop.
Yeah.
What do you have cooking?
Okay. I thought maybe there was going to be a from the frying pan into the fire analogy there.
Some of that.
That's right. So we have a strategy cooking right now. We are really focused on what the future of Goodwill looks like and how we, as the membership organization, can provide services to our members to make sure that we support them. I love the fact that your statement on your annual report is embracing change, because there is so much change in our world that we need to be ready for. So there is change in our retail markets. Now, fortunately, we're in a retail category called treasure hunting. And it's one of the hottest categories, and people come into thrift stores and also places like TJ Maxx, and they want to go in there, they want to find something special and unique. And it's a very hot category. So it's growing. The flip side is other people have noticed the category, and so we have online entrants coming. The three largest online players have raised over $1 billion, are investing it in customer experience, online capabilities, automation. So all of a sudden, we have a very different competitor set. So we have to be very savvy about how we move together to be competitive with people who are getting billions of dollars in capital from investors. So that's a big part of what we're thinking about strategically. Another part of what's happening in our world that's very, very important is the demands of the workforce are changing and will continue to change very rapidly. If you look at any of the predictions around what our workforce needs are going to be in the coming decade or so, automation, artificial intelligence, other changing needs will rapidly require a different kind of skills. And they will also potentially eliminate a lot of jobs that exist today. So we're taking a step back to say, how do we make sure that we can provide relevant skills to people, not only who may be in our traditional participant populations, but also people who have jobs, are paying their bills, are supporting their families, and all of a sudden those jobs go away. And how do we build that bridge of opportunity for them? And so those two sets of factors are playing a lot into how we are thinking about our strategy. The other thing about our strategy is, because we have 157 independent members, not everybody is doing as well as you are, because some people have are having more financial challenges, and you've got some terrific operators here around the room. We got to meet all your store managers, but there are a lot of store managers around the country that aren't as effective in running a good store, don't have the training they need. We have certain affiliates that are losing money. So as we think about our strategy for Goodwill Industries International, we are now beginning to pivot to say, how do we make sure that every store is operating effectively? How do we make sure that we can support local affiliates with great training? How do we make sure that if the workforce needs are changing, we can provide support to make sure that the local Goodwills have access to the best curriculum and the best tools and the best employer relationships nationally? You all obviously have terrific relationships locally. How do we think about that changing world and deliver services effectively? So that's we've got several different pans going on the stovetop in that strategy, but it really focuses on effectiveness in retail, effectiveness in workforce development in a changing world. The third piece we're really focusing on is the brand, so that when people like me get a call about Goodwill, they know what it's about. And then the fourth piece is just how do we be able to move much more quickly with agility when we see changes and need to adapt to them.
Right. So this is a big question that I may wish I hadn't asked. How are we doing?
You're doing great.
All right.
Let me tell you, I figured that out. You asked about my first year. I was a month into the job. First of all, I had the pleasure of meeting Fred on the search committee. And it was very clear to me early on that you all have a leader who thinks in terms of change, who is adaptive, who isn't afraid to move where he needs to. And because Fred was on the board, I learned quickly in subsequent board meetings that he was often the voice that would stand up and say, we've got to think about this differently. So unfortunately, I came on near the end of your board term and we weren't together too long. But Fred is a terrific voice on our board and certainly a terrific voice in the network. But I was a month into the job when we had I got invited to the Conference of Executives. Some of you know what that is, but it's when all of the Goodwills come together for sort of a convening for 3 days. And so here I was, the new guy, and I really didn't know, up from down at that point. And it was hosted by you all in Sandestin, and it ran like a Swiss watch. Your team was unbelievably friendly, unbelievably organized, super accommodating, and it was such a great reflection of the culture of the team, the kind of the servant attitude of the team. And so I was really looking forward to getting down here and seeing what you're doing. And obviously, a lot of the services you're providing here are just essential to the community. And you're doing a lot of different things that are innovative. So, we would love to have a lot more Big Bens out there. So,
well, good. Glad I asked the question.
Yeah, did I read it okay?
Yeah, you did. You got all the points I gave you. All right, so Lisa has a microphone, and if you have a question, raise your hand. She'll bring you the microphone, and Steve would have one. Steve Roden. Lisa?
Steve, first of all, you've done an amazing job, and I love the rigor and the discipline you brought to the national organization. I overheard you guys talking about the brand and the issues around the brand and how do we get people aware, and then the data that you and I've been seeing lately is the millennials particularly don't understand the brand.
Yeah.
And don't understand, what we do. And you're sort of leading the world's largest and probably the best workforce development operation. But as I pointed out in our board meeting, you're also leading probably the largest recycling business in the world, and we're one of the most sustainable.
Yeah.
How do we make that story suddenly live and particularly get our millennials? And is there a science and a rigor and a discipline that we've got to put in place to get that story told?
Yeah, well, without a doubt. So there are a couple of points. I think one of the challenges we have is people's experience with Goodwill is the store. So they donate at the store, they shop in the store, they see the store everywhere. So when they see Goodwill, they think store. If you're at Habitat for Humanity, your experience with Habitat is a hammer and a build. If you're working with Feeding America, your experience with them is a food bank or a donation. So the connection point is something different than our ultimate mission, and I think that's a challenge in of itself. Secondly, we don't. I joked recently at a meeting. I said we don't advertise central. We do some centrally, but we have 157 members plus Goodwill International. So I joke we have 158 brand engines. Everybody's kind of doing their own thing. So we don't come together as a network to say we're going to have one tagline, we're going to have one campaign, we're going to have one way of doing things. Everybody does something different in their territories, and it's not unified. And there's I think an increasing desire of the local Goodwills to begin coming together to say we've got to crack this brand issue. So this is going to be a very important year for us to see whether we can do that. What it takes is a much more consistency in our messaging, being willing to do mission-based advertising and promotions rather than just stores. And that's tough too, because you're trying to drive traffic to the stores, but you're trying to help people understand your mission, and those two things don't always go together, right? And so it's complicated that way, but I think the point about the millennials is something we really have to grab onto, which is, if you look at millennials and Gen Z, obviously that is the emerging and already emerged shopping world, and they're growing in terms of economic impact. They are more likely to buy resale goods than people in the older generations. They are more likely to affiliate with mission-based brands, both of which work great for us. So if we don't get that message out, we do that at our own peril, because that is the population we want to serve. We want to serve all populations, but that's the population we need to develop a deeper relationship with, because if you look at our data, we also skew older in terms of who's buying it. So we've got this great emerging population who wants to do business with people like us, and we're selling mostly to the older population, and these guys don't even know what we do. The other, real thing that sticks in my craw is if you look at the for-profit competitors, like ThredUp or The RealReal or Poshmark. Some of you guys know these people on the internet, or even Savers, which is a for-profit store network. They all lead with sustainability. They're like, we're saving the earth. We're doing all this great stuff. If you buy here, your dollars are, doing all these great things for the environment. And we're sitting back here. I mean, we keep 4 billion pounds of merchandise out of landfills every year. We created the resale industry. We dominate the resale industry, and we don't even talk about sustainability, right? So, and we, as you heard the statistics before, help millions of people on their path to a sustainable life. So if we don't make those powerful messages, we miss out on serving on reaching the population we want to reach. We lose competitively, and also, very importantly, we need to be the voice of people who have no voice. And if people don't know what we do for people in need, we don't have the ability to speak on their behalf, whether it's publicly, whether it's in legislation, whether it's going to corporations who want to engage, whether it's just changing the narrative on people. So the value of changing the brand image is enormous from every perspective. And so this year, that's going to be a big part of our focus. Can we come together to begin doing it? It's a multi-year issue. It takes time. But the other thing I say is we have 3,300 stores, which are all advertising opportunities, and we have an army of 131,000 brand ambassadors, which are our employees, and every one of those people should be able to look at every customer in our store and articulate what our mission is, because that's how we're going to change it.
Next question.
Steve, if you look at that coffee cup right there, it says,
I didn't know Goodwill did that.
to the point. Yeah. All right, other questions?
Yes, sir. Listening to the amazing jobs that you've held previous, what would you best say help prepare you for this new role?
Well, there are a couple of things. Most of the organizations I've led have needed to go through a large transformation. As I mentioned, both of the federal agencies I ran were in the middle of national crises, and we needed to act quickly and change a lot. Both of the companies I led needed to go through large transformations. So those jobs, I think, have enabled me to go into a place and listen real hard and look at what the needs are and work with a team to figure out what's next, why is it next, and how do you communicate that. And that's just, that's born out of both making a lot of mistakes and having a lot of successes at the same time, right? And you just, and so, when you've done these types of things a lot, you begin to be able to see around corners a little bit more. So I always tell people I might not be that smart, but I've seen a lot of battle, and that's been very helpful for me. The other thing is, and I've said this for years, 90% of the best ideas are in the building. 90% of the best ideas are with the team somewhere. You just have to listen to the team, get in front of them, and bring people together to collaborate on the best solution. When I came in to lead the Small Business Administration, as I mentioned before, we had 160,000 people in the Gulf that had no loans, couldn't rebuild their homes. It was a horrific situation. And we kicked off a process. We had a big loan processing facility in Dallas, and we had a big call center in Buffalo. And I brought all the leaders in that room together and in those operations together. We surveyed them heavily. We listened to their views. We did a lot of facilitation, and we brought all that knowledge in the room, which they already knew. We listened to all the clients that didn't have their loans and their problems, so we learned that. And then, the other thing we need to do there, and which I need to do at GII, is begin to change the culture to say that's who we're serving. It's not about what's here, it's about serving those people. And within 6 weeks at the Small Business Administration, the team that had been failing had worked together to completely redesign the process of making federal loans to disaster victims, launch a new process. We physically moved thousands of people, changed workflows, I won't get into it. And within weeks of that reorganization, had doubled production, and we had $6 billion in people's hands in about 3 months. And it wasn't because I was brilliant, it was because we got the people in the room together to stop fighting, stop talking about problems, and just brought them together in a way with all the data to say, how do we fix this together? And that's what we're hearing, that's what I'm hearing with Goodwill. Everybody knows what the opportunities are. They just don't know, but there's not the opportunity to get together and get after the national opportunity unless we get people together to design those solutions. And so that's probably what's helped me along the way.
I have a question for you, Mr. Preston. If you had one thing to say about Goodwill that would influence someone to shop or become a member of Goodwill or donate, what would it be?
I would say the donations you're making could change a person's life in a way that's sustainable, right? It's not a Band-Aid. We're not serving, we're helping them change, fundamentally change their lives for a better future. That's the one thing I'd say. And I think that just cuts through everything.
Hey there, Steve.
Hey there.
What has been your most outrageous or funny experience so far at Goodwill?
Oh, gosh. My most outrageous or funny experience at Goodwill. Yeah, I probably need to see more humor in life. Gosh, I don't know. I'll have to think about that one.
How
I will
about,
say, no, I'll tell you the experience. I'll tell you. Are you gonna? Or were you gonna tell me one?
well, I was going to remind you what Steve from Houston said at CEO. We're all going to die.
My funniest experience was when the First Step Act was passed. This is a piece of legislation that was passed to allow people who are incarcerated to leave before the end of their sentence if they were viewed as being, if their sentences were excessively long. And, so there's a number of people coming out. The White House came to us and said, would you help us figure out how to work with these people when they come out to get them employed? And so I got a call from the White House, and we were helping them, and we were working with the program. We got a call to say, would you be willing to show up at an event in the East Room and appear with the president with a couple of other service providers and give a talk? And I said, sure. And so, but they said, now we're not sure if we want you to talk, but we might. And could you send us your speech? Because the president might want to say it instead. And it was like this very kind of crazy thing. So I got there. I literally showed up. I didn't know if I was giving a speech or not. But I said, no, let me give you his talking points, and then I'll keep mine over here because I think they're different. And so I've spoken in that room before from when I was in the administration before. And so it's a very kind of otherworldly situation, right? You're in the White House. You go through all this stuff to get in. I knew what it was going to be like because I'd spoken from that podium before, and it's just a strange situation. There are movie camera or television cameras. So I walk in, and good, bad, or indifferent, if I look at a piece of paper or presentation, like my eye will immediately go to a typo or to something. So I'm in line. They said, you're going to give the speech. There's a staffer holding a clipboard, and I look over it, and my eye immediately goes to K. Kardashian. And I don't know why, but I said it was the attendee list. So I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So I get up there, the president speaks, and there are a couple of funny things that happened. This is a long story. I'm starting to realizing it's probably too long of a story. Number one is, like, I'm 5'7". The president is 6'4" and about this big, right? So I'm standing behind him, and I can see he's about to introduce me, and there's two people to his right and two to his left, and he says, Steve? Steve? And then he does this, and then the next person who goes up and speaks is Kim Kardashian. He called her out of the audience. So I'm sitting there between Donald Trump and Kim Kardashian thinking, what was that Talking Heads song from years ago? How did I get here, right? How did I get, this is not my whatever. And sure enough, the picture on the CNN news app the next morning was the president, Kim Kardashian, and me sitting in the back, kind of like this. And so all this, one of my friends from business school saw it, got everywhere. For some reason, this picture showed up at the Washington Post later. It keeps showing up. And then about 3 months later, it was on this episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians because she talked about her White House experience, and they were showing all this footage, and there I am in the back like this. And my daughter said, you're on Keeping Up with the Kardashians? I'm like, so I had to watch the show once to see what it was about, and all I can say is I was alone in the room blushing without anybody seeing, because I was like, oh my goodness, I'd never seen the show. So anyway, that was the experience.
Good afternoon. Mr. President already alluded to the retail apocalypse, which took out about 9,200 stores last year, about a 59% increase over the year prior. And we're different, okay? We're where they're going to, not from. As he mentioned, TJ Maxx, selling best brands, is doing quite well. We had a good year last year. We're up almost 9%. Our donation value increased by about 10%, so it was a very good year for us. We see a number of good years coming up over the next 10. They're saying that our particular part of retail will double in size over the next 10 years. Currently, there's about 25,000 resellers in the market. Within 10 years, it should get to about 50,000. Right now, the lion's share of that belongs to Goodwill. However, we're going to have to continue to work hard at it and stay ahead of our competition as we go forward. We all can look back and remember when Sears was a powerful retailer, along with the Pennies of the world. You take a look at Macy's today, closing 125 stores. The consumer has shifted, but there are opportunities for Goodwill as we go forward. We had a good year. As I mentioned, we're up 9%. We have two stores, though, that really stood out amongst the rest, and one of which ran up 28% over the prior year for a $252,000 increase over the prior year, and that is the Mariana store. Lanita Vilke, will you please come up? Like all retail companies, you have milestones. And one of ours for the longest time was achieving $1 million in sales. Well, it's kind of difficult to talk and brag about doing $1 million today when 2/3 of the stores are hitting $1 million plus. So we've got a store, though, that was able to achieve more than the $1 million mark and move us to a $2 million mark. And it did $2,052,000. Our first store to really push above the $2 million mark, and that's Santa Rosa Beach, and the manager, John Provenzano. Next, I'd like to welcome up Kim Saneeth, the director of our Learning Pavilion. Kim?
Good afternoon, everybody. Miss Tanya has been with the Learning Pavilion for almost 3 years. She came to us with 14 years of experience in early childhood education. And I would say Miss Tanya has probably one of the hardest jobs at the Learning Pavilion as our lead teacher in our infant room. It can be scary for first-time moms, first-time dads, any parent or caregiver handing over their 6-week-old infant. And often it's harder on the parents than it is the kiddo. But Miss Tanya has a knack for putting parents' mindset at ease, as they put their little one into her arms, and she's a stellar cheerleader too, encouraging parents and giving them the assurance and confidence to go to work knowing that their kiddo will be loved and nurtured in her care. Additionally, Miss Tanya is our infant-toddler team captain, so she assists in the curriculum implementation in all of our classrooms, mentors new staff, and gives tours to prospective parents. And I couldn't forgive myself if I did not take just a quick minute to brag on what a great artist Miss Tanya is. This woman can draw, paint, and craft up a storm. She has definitely raised the bar in all of our very friendly classroom competitions, from door decorating competitions, spirit days, and our trunk or treat event. Miss Tanya is an amazing mom of 3 incredible daughters, a dedicated wife, and I feel very lucky to have her on the Learning Pavilion team. Please join me in congratulating Miss Tanya. She is a tremendous asset to the Learning Pavilion and to Goodwill Industries Big Bend. And next up is the marvelous Mr. Will Fisher.
Thank you, Kim. I've been at Goodwill for almost 9 years now, working in the Mission Services Department, and if there's one thing I can tell you, it's that without our partnerships, we would never be able to meet our goals. So in May of 2019, I met Jennifer with Advantage Resourcing. We sat down and discussed how we could try to help the communities who were affected by Hurricane Michael A lot of people lost their jobs, had to relocate, and needed new career opportunities. And Advantage Resourcing partners and hires a lot of individuals in our communities. So we discussed putting on events, trying to do one every 2 weeks at different locations. And so far, we've done about 18 events since then. And Advantage Resourcing has hired over 150 individuals, which is a tremendous assistance to us and us meeting our goals and also changing the lives of people in our communities. We're even going to be continuing to go do interviews after this today in Tallahassee. So Advantage Resourcing is going to continue to be a great partner with us, and we're going to keep changing the lives of the people that we serve in our communities. So Jennifer, I thank you so much, and Advantage Resourcing for partnering with us and being our mission partner of the year.
Hello. As most of you know, we are within our training centers, we depend heavily on our volunteers. I am here today to recognize Carvin J. Johnson. We call him Jay. But first of all, I would like to give a shout out to all of our volunteers. We are a small training center in Valparaiso. We could not do what we do without the help of our volunteers. So most of us, and we do ask everyone to please tell us when you get a job, but if somebody has gone through one of our programs, we say, please volunteer with us. But one volunteer does stand out, and that is Jay. Jay has been coming to our center since 2016. He volunteers a couple of days a week, walks in the door, wants to know what's going on today, and it doesn't matter what that is. He steps in, and whether it's proctoring a class, helping someone get their high school diploma, or just helping me in the lab, keeping the heat off of iVenture, keeping our computers up and running. So it is my pleasure to, and I thank you for awarding him as Volunteer of the Year. Jay cannot be with us today. His priority right now is with his wife. She is requiring 24/7 care, so he is with her. So thank you, though, and it is an honor to accept this award for him. I'm very proud of Valp CTC because I get to accept another award. Graduate of the Year. We have many, many people that go through our programs and have come out with certifications. But Jonathan Milner is one that stands out with us. He came to me needing a job. He excelled academically and passed any assessment. There was no program, there was nothing I could offer him other than get him to be a volunteer to help teach the classes. But Jonathan had a medical condition, and it limited him as to what type work he could do. Being even in this group of people could be fatal for him. So it was at the time we were given the scholarships, awarded the scholarships for the Google IT. I was able to award him with in the program. He went through the program, finished it even before the deadline was required, suffered 2 heart attacks during that time, and he's only in his 20s. But Jonathan persevered. He has graduated. We were able to help him land a job with a CRM in IT. He advanced within that company. And this morning he actually called me because he can't be here today. He is a full-time student as well. He works full-time. But he has an interview with the University of West Florida in cybersecurity, and he wanted to thank us all for giving him that opportunity. And he also wanted to use me a reference, and of course I said yes. So I am just honored and thrilled to be able to accept this award for him. Thank you. Our next presenter is our VP of Human Resources, Tamara Williams.
Hi, I get the privilege of presenting an award to the Employee of Distinction today. And it just so happens it happens to be someone that's on my team also, so that's like a double feel good for me. But Employee of Distinction, distinction is excellence that sets you above and beyond. They can't. I can hear me. Is that better? Okay, sorry. So it's Employee of Distinction Award. And the distinction says excellence that sets you above others. And so this individual definitely is an example of that. Just in her profession alone, she is a professional, 20 years experience. She's certified. Not only is she knowledgeable enough to do her job here at Goodwill, but she actually teaches classes and educates other upcoming HR professionals and teaches them the ways of the world so they can pass their certification. So that's a step above. But I think the reason she got nominated multiple times by her peers, by the folks out here that she works with and helps, is because she goes above and beyond when it comes to caring for our employees. In a quick story, just as an example, recently we had a store manager that had a significant health event, was unable to work. That employee has some benefits that would have been available to them. And our only obligation is to make sure, hey, remember you have this benefit and there's some forms you have to fill out. But this person was in a medical facility, did not have the support and the help that she needed to get those forms filled out. And so this individual, along with another coworker, took up the gauntlet and said, we're going to make sure these forms get filled out so she can have this benefit while she's not able to come to work. Went to the medical facility, bribed, we're not going to have any details because the statute of limitations hasn't run out yet, but bribed a nurse to then blackmail a doctor, again, statute of limitations, to get these documents signed, and was determined to make sure that that employee had access to that benefit, and in a time that was already trying, that was already difficult. And that's just one example of how Angela Smitherman, Angela, is an employee of distinction.
I do, because I know it's not in the program, and I apologize, but Lisa Land said I could do it. And so, yes, my name is on the award, and I thank you so much. But the truth is, today I just happen to be the face of our HR team, both in the East and in the West, in Panama City. And that's, of course, comprised of your HR team, which is generalists and specialists, of course, safety, and super important training and development. And we try every day, not always successful, but we try every day to serve your needs. That's what servant leadership is all about, and that's what we try to do, balancing the needs of you as leaders and those you lead, or other employees, and of course the needs of the company. Sometimes it's a little tricky, but that's what we're here for, and we always want to do our very best for you. So thank you so much. I'm so honored.
Well, it's my honor to tell you a little bit about one of my employees. He's been with us for 44 years. He started as a child, and back then they didn't care about child labor laws, but, we have to watch that now. So he started in our upholstery department, which some of y'all might remember, we used to reupholster furniture. And then they gave him the task to teach other deaf people how to reupholster furniture. So I taught the people who come through our program how to do furniture, how to recover mattresses. And then we decided that it wasn't beneficial to us to continue to do that. So we moved Ira around, And I think he's worked in every department we've ever had. But he's an excellent team member, and I think everyone who knows him loves him. So, Ira. Ira's telling everybody that he's pretty. And now we need to go over anniversaries. We have some who have been here 10 years. We're going to call them up first. That's Justin Thompson, Vicki Beaumont, Paul McAuliffe, Joseph Dobbs, Lillian Vasquez, Lenita Valkyrie, Roxanne Tabot, Andrea Smith, Pamela Kelly, Wayman Favors. Those are all 10-year employees. Joseph? Thank you all for spending 10 years with us, and we hope you're here another 34, so you can be here with Ira. Our next group is going to be the 15-year people, which would be John Lackey, Donna Jernigan, and now for the 20-year people, one would be me. Teresa Gray, Shannon Harper, and we thank y'all for coming. In y'all's board, in your annual report is also the golf tournament brochure. Please support us. If you want to play, it's in May, and we have a great time. So thank you all for coming. Join us next year, please.